I need to start off by saying that this story was told to me by my grandmother. She is somebody who has a crazy amount of factual recall and can tell a story from 50 years ago like it happened last week. This takes place in the late 1970s in the metropolitan Detroit area. My grandparents lived out in what was the boonies at the time. They were on a dirt road that was mostly fields, woods, and a couple of farms a mile or so to the north. Their house sat on 10 acres and was back off the road a ways, and then to the right of them was my great-grandparents' house, which sat about 200 feet away. To the left and right of their property was about a half mile of fields and then a main road. My grandparents lived in this house with their 3 children, and my grandpa worked midnights at a local auto plant. One night, my grandma is sitting watching TV. It's around 11 or 12 at this point, and she hears a knock on the front door. She peeks out the front window and can see in the moonlight that there is no car in her driveway or visible anywhere on the street. I have to give her credit for thinking on her feet in this moment, though. They lived in a tri-level home, which means that the basement is half underground and the upstairs is not as high up as the regular 2-story house. She went upstairs to their bedroom and opened the window, which was above the front step, and she looked down to see a man standing at the door. She calls down to him and asks what it is that he wants, and he explains that his car broke down up the road and that he walked back here to see if he could use her phone. He explained that he was on the way to his girlfriend's house, which was up at the corner. The problem with his story was that where he described his car breaking down, he would have only been a couple hundred yards away from his girlfriend's house, but instead of walking there, he walked back down the street half a mile. So she realizes that something isn't adding up and tells the guy that she unfortunately wasn't able to help him. The guy starts to get agitated and is pleading with her to please let him use the phone, and he promises that he'll be quick and then be on his way. While she's leaning out the window and telling this guy that he needs to be on his way, she can suddenly hear fast-moving feet on the gravel driveway off in the darkness, followed by a crashing noise as a second man comes flying out from next to the garage and hits the ground. At this point, the man on the porch turns on his heels and sprints off into the night and is gone. She looks back to the driveway to see that this man on the ground has a third man on top of him who is raining fists down directly into his face. A moment or two later, the beaten man was able to wrestle himself free and join the first by sprinting off into the darkness. What my grandma didn't know while speaking with the guy on the porch was that while their conversation was going on, the man on the porch's accomplice was pressed flat up against the front of the house by the garage. These men were waiting for her to open the door so they could both storm in and do who knows what. But unbeknownst to them, however, was the fact that next door at my great-grandma's house was my cousin who was home visiting. He happened to be sitting up at the kitchen table and saw the 2 men approach the house, and he saw the one take up his hiding spot before the other began knocking. He was out the door and ran full speed over and attacked the man that was in hiding, and the guy went down like a sack of hammers. A fun fact was that during this time, my cousin was a boxing champion in the Naval Pacific Fleet. My grandma called the police, and unfortunately the 2 men in their vehicle were not found. We do know, though, however, that one of the men had a receipt of getting his ass kicked because 2 teeth were found on the ground, which my grandma has a memento in a little glass bottle to this very day. So I and my wife went to a movie last night. Skyscraper. It was okay, and got home around 9 p.m. We live in a new development. It's middle class to upper middle class, a nice safe area. We don't have a mailbox in front of our house. It's one of those neighborhoods where the mailboxes are together at the end of our street, so we don't always check it, but I knew I was getting a package from Amazon, so we went by. There was the package and a letter with a typed envelope made out to my name, but with a return address with no name, but from the street behind us. We don't know anyone here well, so I opened it up and we drove down the street. What I read shocked me. It says, "We are watching you, Mr. Sex Pervert," with a picture of 2 creepy eyes. I was floored. So we get home and my wife is upset. I'm pissed off and confused. To be clear, I'm truly not a pervert as far as I know. I'm faithfully married to my wife. We have no weird fetishes. I've never even been accused of anything perverted in my life, by anyone. Nor have I really done anything that comes to mind. If anything, my wife had complained about me being too bland. So anyways, by my wife's urging, I call the sheriff's department. They agree it's creepy and that they will send someone out, but can't promise how long it will be. Then things get even weirder. We've been home about 5 minutes now in total, and our car alarm starts going off. It's happened before. I occasionally accidentally hit the panic button in my pocket. But I'm sitting inside by the window hitting the stop button and it won't turn off. I admittedly get frustrated. I'm already in a bad mood and throw it down and it breaks my key fob. But my wife turns it off with hers. So we decide to take a drive and see what house this letter came from behind us before the sheriff shows up. Turns out that house number doesn't exist. For some reason they skipped it when numbering the street, but if it had existed, it would be about directly behind us. When we pull up to the house, our next door neighbors and the ones across the street are both outside talking animatedly. We go see what's going on. Apparently, when our car alarm was going off, so was our next door neighbors. They parked in the street between our two houses. I hadn't heard theirs, with mine also going off, but they did. And the neighbor across the street heard 2 car alarms going off and came out to look. And right in front of his house was a guy sitting in a black car, lights off, who, once he came out, took off down the road quickly with his lights off. He chased it a little by foot, trying to get a license plate, but it was too dark and they took off. So he also calls the sheriff. About 5 minutes later, 2 pull up coincidentally about the same time. The one dispatched for my call and one for his. They have no idea what to think. Ask if I have enemies, bad exes, or family problems. If I've ever been accused of anything. Or if I can think of anyone, but the truthful answer to all of those is no. But they take a report. They take the letter and evidence, give me a card if anything else happens. So I barely slept that night. I'm just dumbstruck and confused. I don't know any of my neighbors well except the next door ones. Not many people even know my address. Since they use a return address of the street behind us for an address that doesn't exist, I feel like they know the area. My name and address are on our HOA website, which could be where they got my name, possibly. But I've truly done nothing. My imagination is running wild, but I'm out of ideas. Was the car coincidence? Is this person just insane? My wife is scared but trusts me. Any ideas on what to do next or why somebody would be doing this are appreciated. So when I was younger, around 13 or 14, I was invited to go on a camping trip with my best friend Pat, his dad, and his uncles. It was this kind of guys' weekend coming of age thing. Something I like to do with my kids now. You know, fishing, cooking over fires, our first couple of beers, sleeping in tents, and stuff like that. We drove pretty far up north, but this many years later, being 30, I can't remember where exactly we went. I know it was about 2 hours north of where I live now. We had parked Pat's dad's truck off the side of the road in a bush and canoed a pretty far distance down a river to a lake and set up our camp at the edge of the water. Right across the water, we could see this really old, abandoned-looking cabin. On the outside, it looked abandoned, the roof was sagging and all the bushes were growing up around it. At one point, Pat's dad and his uncles were fishing and drinking and allowed us to go adventuring a bit. Surprisingly, they actually allowed us to take one of the canoes across the water to check out the abandoned cabin. In hindsight, I don't think I would let my boys now go that far where I couldn't get to them in emergency, but they were drunk, so being 13-ish-year-old boys, we did exactly that. We paddled across and checked it out. On the outside, this thing looked super decrepit. The front door was unlocked and we went inside. This was a mistake. On the inside, it was certainly not abandoned and very lived in. It really freaked us out knowing somebody lived there but was obviously nowhere nearby. There were porn magazines spread across the table, a bong, a tray full of weed, beer bottles everywhere, and on one of the shelves in the living room were 2 hunting shotguns. I know it was dumb to play with them, but we did. Never pulled the trigger, just walked around the house with them like idiots feeling cool. We checked out different rooms in the house, but one really creeped us out. Yes, I understand we technically committed a break and enter, or a trespass, but we honestly thought it was abandoned before we got inside. Once we were in, we figured it was somebody's hangout or something, but it was pretty deep out in the woods. Anyways, one of the rooms had those mannequins that you see in a clothing store, but none of them were wearing any clothes. And they all had wigs, different lengths and colors. Something felt really off about that, and we decided we'd had enough and left after putting the guns back where we found them. After canoeing back to our campsite, we told Pat's dad everything. He was almost as stunned as we were. That evening, we fished some more, and Pat caught a fish that his dad cooked over the fire. While we were eating dinner, 2 guys came by in a motorboat and stopped at our site. They were friendly enough. We all joked around a bit, and we had assumed they were just other campers or people out fishing. People like us. But then they invited us to their cabin just across the water to hang out. Pat's dad politely declines, and then they still lingered, and things just started to feel weird. The two guys were drinking quite a lot and exchanging weird looks. At one point, they even asked Pat and me if just the two of us would go hang out. Pat's dad gave them a stern no, and things were even more awkward. They stayed a while until it got dark, and then they left. That night, Pat's dad and uncle stayed up all night by the fire while we were asleep in the tent. We didn't do much sleeping, mostly just talking about how creeped out we were by those two guys that lived in that cabin, and their wigs, porn, and guns. Eventually, we fell asleep. In the morning, everything was packed up, and Pat's dad cut the trip short. We put the tent we were in away and left immediately. Most of the trip back was spent talking about how his dad was really freaked out by those guys. Pat and I have talked about it here and there over the years, but years ago, we had a major falling out. I never did ask exactly where that cabin was. I wouldn't want to go back there anyways. This happened a couple of weeks ago. I'm a female dog walker, and I spend a lot of time by myself in various parks and forests, so I'm pretty aware of my surroundings, but haven't had anything happen until now. So I'm walking these dogs. A pack of 3 small breed dogs, essentially the opposite of scary dog privileges. And this man comes out of nowhere and straight up to me. Middle-aged, thin, and in shorts and a hoodie, but not ringing any alarm bells. He just looks like a normal guy. He strikes up a conversation, and I'm polite. Just talking about the weather, etc., and thinking he's just a friendly stranger, when out of nowhere, he says, "I saw another lady dog walker yesterday, and she had a nervous dog, so I was trying to help socialize him." Which is weird because it didn't sound like he knew the dog walker in question, and my assumption was confirmed when he continued, "Yeah, I know about dogs, so I took out my slip lead and tried to get him used to it." And she freaked out. For anyone who doesn't know, this is like a slip knot that tightens if the dog pulls on it. Then, while I'm trying to process what the hell he's talking about, he takes a slip lead out of his pocket and shows it to me. At which point, one of the dogs, who normally loves everyone, starts a warning growl. He just laughs, and I'm starting to feel super uneasy because he doesn't have any dogs with him. And why does he have what is essentially a strangulation device just in his pocket? Eventually, I manage to get away, saying something about my dad waiting in the car, and he watches me walk away while my dogs keep growling back at him. Once in my car, I actually processed what he said and did, and everything my gut was telling me was off about the situation, and I decided to call the police to report him. So, when I was around 20 female, I was newly single and exploring the apps. I matched with this guy named Alex. He wasn't my usual type, but his profile seemed cool. He showed he was in school, had a car and job, plus friends, so he didn't seem weird to me at all. We got to talking and he seems pretty into me, so we set up a date. He came to pick me up for a driving date. So basically, I sat in his car for hours driving around. Yeah, I don't know why I did this, but I blame it on being young and dumb. So he started driving. We drove for about 40 minutes all the way to downtown, mind you, and during these 40 minutes, he was blasting music at full volume with the windows down. Everybody on the sidewalk is staring at us while he's screaming the lyrics out the window. When I brought up that I thought that it was a little loud, he said, "Nah, everyone loves it." They in fact did not love it, I can assure you. Anyways, we get to the heart of downtown and he parks outside a very famous and prominent tower in the city and gets down on the ground and just stares at it. No warning, nothing. This is where I started to think he was a little strange. He then hopped up and said, "Let's go get some food now." It was very weird. So now we begin driving to get food, and he drives about 2 cities outside of the one we're in. Essentially, we've been driving now for hours. While on this drive, he starts spewing racist bullshit, and then abruptly tells me that he's a very depressed and troubled person and asks me if I can relate. With this, I was very taken aback and didn't really know what to say. I mean, I've known this man for a few hours at this point, and didn't think the conversation would get this deep. At this point, the vibe he was giving off was scary, and I started to feel in danger. But I was even more scared that if I offended him, something bad could happen. Let's not forget, I'm in his car. He has my home address, and I'm 2 cities away from mine. So I played nice. We finally got to a food spot and ate some dinner. At least he paid, right? Anyways, now's when it starts to get really creepy. We begin driving again, back to our city, but he keeps taking the long way, so our 1-hour drive turns more into a 3-hour drive. At this point, we're back in the city, but it's really late at night, around 11:30 p.m. This is when he goes into a dark neighborhood and he starts driving really fast around tight corners. As he's doing this, I ask him to slow down because he's scaring me, and he turns and looks at me with no emotion and says, "You know, I've had some really hard days in my life." And I said, "I know, you told me. I'm sorry." Then he said, "I used to be so mad that I would come and drive my car just like this and look for squirrels to run over so something else could hurt as much as I did." I was in shock. I was honestly very terrified with what he said, not to mention his strangeness from the start. All I could do was ask if he still did it, and he said no, not anymore. I knew that wasn't true, but I thought if I offended him, he would easily overpower me, so I played it nice again. At this point, we were very close to my home, about 10 minutes away. Then abruptly, he asked if I'd been to this park that's coming up. This park is at the bottom of a cliff, and it's the middle of the night. I have been to this park, but even if I hadn't, I would have said yes because there was no way I wanted that man to drive me down there. He then said, "Oh, perfect, I have it. You can show me around," and took a right and drove down the very dark road to the bottom of the park, where the parking lot was completely empty with about 6 streetlights total. Needless to say, I thought I would be victim number 1. Since I'm here, I obviously wasn't, but his tone and mannerisms were so strange while we were there. He then basically forced me to kiss him pretty intimately and got handsy while I kept pushing him off. It didn't escalate past that, and then he drove me home. When I was in 7th grade, I wasn't stupid. I knew when somebody was watching me, and I sure wasn't ugly. I was in shape from playing soccer and going to the gym to stay in shape. I wish I loved myself a bit more back then, but that's besides the point. I was very obviously underage because my face looked 10 and I wore a backpack. Plus, my school was directly next to the Starbucks where this creep worked. Since I was in a bad place back then, I kept several journal entries about my encounter with this man that can help me piece together some details and a timeline of events. Now let's begin. I was 12 and soon to be 13 in 4 months. I was brand new to the area, and unlike my old school, my new school wouldn't let students inside early. This was awful because 1, my school started at 8:40 and my mom would drop me off on the way to work at 7:10. 2, it was Texas and very humid and hot most days, or pouring down rain. To avoid sitting outside in the awful weather, I'd have my mom drop me off at the Starbucks directly next to my school. So many middle schoolers would be there, and even some elementary schoolers, because the elementary school was connected to my middle school by a gate. So if you saw a young girl with a backpack, it was extremely obvious the girl wasn't legal. I've always been a very awkward person in new environments, so the first day my mom dropped me off at Starbucks, I was so embarrassed about filling up a seat inside that a paying customer could use, and I ended up sitting outside in the sweltering heat for an hour. I regret my decision so much to this day because the creep, as we will call him, had seen me out there all by myself and realized I was an easy target. He came outside and started talking to me and started complimenting my long hair and beautiful face. When he asked for my name, I told him I wasn't comfortable giving it. After that, he made it his mission to find out my name. In the days following, I grew comfortable enough to go inside and find myself a seat. Here's my first journal entry. I have very bad handwriting. Skipping to the part I mentioned, the creep. It had been a month into the school year by now. The new school is too new and too weird. Since I first sat at Starbucks before school, the worker won't leave me alone. He's been making me free drinks and randomly talking to me. I feel guilty and sick. I feel like he's hitting on me in a way. Today he's singing about me to the tune of his stupid music. When the place was busy, I snuck out of there. Alright, so I remember this. I walked inside the cafe and he was mopping and sweeping up a mess, and he was obviously in control of the aux because some song I had never heard before was playing. He saw me enter and began to sing badly about what I was wearing at the time and described my long hair like I was Rapunzel. He had already made my usual drink and handed it to me as few strangers watched. He knew my schedule like clockwork. Normally, I sat in the corner seat that faced the register, but today I sat with my back to the register so he couldn't see my face. Explaining what I meant by feeling guilty, I did not like to accept anything free from anyone. I grew up being called spoiled by my older sister, so I grew up used to telling everyone no when they offered me things because my sister would get jealous. Here's my next entry about him. Today was terrible. I got dropped off earlier than usual and I was begging the worker not to be there. He was there. He kept calling my name, which I never told him, and he pronounces it as Jacoda. He was giving me a drink to give my teacher, which I hate, and he also told him by name in the first place. The reason he was giving him a drink was because he told him my name. Gave him the drink back and left. So the day before, I was sitting in Starbucks and my history teacher walked in, wearing his lanyard and ID. The creep had been asking other teachers before about my identity, but none of them taught me and didn't know it. Well, obviously my history teacher would know it, since he taught me. After the worker made my teacher's drink, he pointed at me and asked my name. Dakota, he said, and left. The next day, I grabbed my drink and waited an hour for classes to start. As I'm leaving, the creep calls out my name, which he misheard, and I go to the counter to see what he wants. He pushes a big hot drink towards me, and I remember being very confused about why he made me two, since I had already drunk one. Anyway, I liked them cold, not hot, since it was still summer. When I asked him what it was for, he told me to give it to my teacher, since he was kind enough to give away my name. I was frazzled, gave him the drink back, and left. I'm glad I had written it down in my journal because my brain created a fake memory of walking down the hallway to give my history teacher the drink. This was obviously not the case. Next entry mentioning him. We all have that person we'll do anything for. Hannah. We all have that person who makes us question our sanity. My friends. We all have that person we'll never admit to ourselves that we're scared of. The Starbucks worker. P.S. I've always wanted to be a writer, so this entry was a little dramatic, but I was very much petrified of the creep at this point. Next mention of him. I saw the creepy worker after school. He was outside Starbucks talking to two sitting, smoking ladies. He was standing over them, smiling. The girls had kids. I was near the window. I couldn't stop looking at him. I didn't want him to see me. He's creepy. I kept my hood up. This was the last of my entries, but the year I was in 8th, I still saw him frequently in passing. I knew he didn't work Wednesdays, so I would only enter the Starbucks if it was Wednesday. Some other things. He only treated me special and no one else. Once again, he knew I was a minor. He'd frequently tell me I was beautiful. He once asked me if I wanted to know his name, but he wasn't wearing a name tag, and I wasn't about to tell him. Yes, I want to know your name, because it could have given him the wrong message and made him think I was attracted to him. I wanted to know it because I wanted to warn others about him. He gave me so many damn free drinks, and I knew damn well he was paying for them out of pocket. He probably spent over $100 on me to give me those drinks. This took place around 2 years ago. I was driving to work, a 5-hour drive. It was already dark. After about 3 hours of driving, I started to get tired. I bought myself a coffee and some snacks at a gas station and went on. But snacks and coffee can only keep you awake for so long, and I started to feel tired again. This part of the road was nothing but thick, dark pinewood forest around me. No other cars on the road. Nothing. Only insects smashing my windshield now and then, and an empty road. I was now extremely tired, and at one point I nearly drove off the road from almost falling asleep. I have to sleep now. I can't wait for a gas station. I need to stop as soon as I see a place where I can park my car. Anything. When I'm tired, I fall asleep really fast. If I'm tired enough, I can fall asleep in the middle of a sentence when I'm talking. So it's a bit urgent for me to find a place where I can stop. It felt like an hour, but probably just 5 minutes went by and I spotted this little pocket in the road. It's like a parking space for quick stops, like peeing, switching drivers, or stuff like that. Not even a real resting area. I stopped here and turned down my windows to check if I heard any weird noises. Total silence. I turned up the windows again. Nothing bad is going to happen. I haven't seen a car for like 30 minutes. This road is empty. If someone is checking out my car, I bet it's the cops checking on me to see if I'm alright. I leave my keys in the ignition and I lock the doors just to be safe. I adjust my seat a bit to make it more comfortable to sleep in, and I take off my shoes and put them on the passenger seat on the right. It was so nice to close my eyes, and I instantly fall asleep. I don't know why, but something wakes me up. I can't really see anything. Some kind of bright light hits me in the eyes. First, I thought it was a flashlight, but then I realized it was the high beams from another car in my rearview mirror that was blinding me. I look in my left mirror, and I see a dude walking up beside my car. Maybe he wants help with something. Should I make it clear to him that I'm in here? He's right beside my left back door. Should I step out and ask what he's doing? I didn't have to. The dude proceeds to jerk and pull on my left back door. I almost shit my pants when I realize that he's trying to force his way into my car. My seat is adjusted for me to lie down, and I pushed it back max. I can't reach the pedals, which makes it impossible for me to drive my car. I slam the car horn, and it breaks the silence with a roar. And the dude jumps. That gives me like 2 seconds to push my seat to reach the pedals, but it's still way out of adjustment, so I'm kind of pulling myself to the steering wheel because my seat is lying flat and isn't supporting my back. Anyway, I start my car and drive off with a cloud of smoke from my screeching tires. It's hard driving a car with nothing holding up your upper body, but I managed. As I leave, I look in the mirror and I can see how the dude stands there and looks at me. And I can see 2 more guys coming up beside him. From what I can see in the silhouette of their beams, one of them was holding something in his hand, like a wrench or a crowbar. I drove super fast, way over the speed limit. My whole body was trembling with adrenaline and fear. I drove like that for at least 30 minutes, and then I stopped at a gas station to fix my seat and put my shoes on again. I figured out I was only sleeping for like 10 minutes. Well, I didn't have to sleep until I got to my destination, which is surrounded by heavy-duty fencing, and the building has an alarm. I told my boss the next day, and he said they actually have problems with what we call in Sweden road pirates, criminals that force you to stop on the road and rob you of everything, including your car, in that specific area. It could just be 3 nice dudes that wanted to check if I was okay. Then why didn't they just knock on my driver's window? The thing in his hand could be a big flashlight. This was 2014. I was 17 at the time, and I would have to take the bus to and from school. The bus stop was on the main road, so I would have to walk a few blocks to get to the apartment complex. This is important for later. I was walking home from school one day, and this Honda van pulls over. A girl comes out, she introduces herself and tells me that she's new to the area and wants to make friends. I gave her my number, and quickly we made plans to have dinner. Maybe a day or 2 later, she picks me up in the same van, but this time with a man who was driving and also another young female. She did not mention these other 2 people, but I didn't think much of it. There were a lot of red flags I ignored. I was young and naive. The man was doing all the talking during our dinner, and the other 2 girls were quiet. Another red flag. He put on his fake nice tone in his voice the whole time, asking me questions. Then he started getting weird, like saying how he can read minds, and started telling me all this information he knows about me. I had no idea how he knew all that, so I believed him. After dinner, we stopped by their house, which was in a whole other city than where my apartment is. Remember how the girl told me that she stayed by me? Another red flag. It was a really nice house though, and he had a Mercedes in the driveway. My young mind was intrigued. He told me how they were all roommates and hustled together. He took me back home that night though, by himself, and was trying to convince me to be a part of their lifestyle. A couple days later, at this point, I'm only texting the man. The girl barely held any conversation with me, but he tricked me into thinking he was this super nice person. He asked me to pack some clothes and spend the night, and I agreed. After hours of talking, he convinced me to leave my mom's house and stay with them. I texted my mom that I was moving out, and as I was already almost 18, she was okay with it for some reason. This is when shit hit the fan. He was not the nice, charming person that I had met. Only after I moved in did he tell me that those girls were sex workers and that I would become one too when I turned 18. He started telling me how to do my hair or how to dress. He gave me a whole new phone and number with a tracking app on it. I wasn't allowed to contact my mother or any of my family or friends. He would keep insisting he could read my minds and hear my thoughts. Even for the smallest mistakes I made, he would punish me for them. He duct taped my hands and feet, tased my vagina, stabbed me with screwdrivers, threw me from the 2nd floor by one leg, and punched me until I passed out. All with a smile on his face. He enjoyed hurting me. I'll never forget the look on his face. I can't explain it. It's like his eyes literally turned black. I thought people were only like this in the movies. People are really out here torturing people. He also made me watch those gore videos of people getting decapitated and the most disgusting videos of people getting tortured I'd ever seen, all while holding a knife to my neck. He would also have sex with me every day when the girls went to work at the hotels. He would lie and say I was the only one he was intimate with and that I was special. He told me if I ever tried to leave or if I told anyone where I was at, he would kill me and them. He'd go into detail about how exactly he wanted to kill me and where he would put my body. One day, he had me lie down and beat me so bad in my stomach while his leg was choking me over my neck. I blacked out and woke up so confused. My vision was tunneled. I had a huge knot in the back of my head. I couldn't even stand up straight. I had no idea what else he did to me while I was passed out. But at that point, I told myself this man was going to kill me. I'd rather risk him killing me if I got caught trying to leave than spend any more time with this monster. I didn't care about the threats anymore. I just wanted to be gone. I didn't sleep that night. I waited until I heard him snoring really loud, and I made a run for it. I took nothing. Not even the phone, because it had a tracker on it. And I actually made it, by the grace of God. I still didn't speak to my mother for about 3 months out of fear. I was right, because he went looking for me at her apartment. Don't even know how he knew where she lived. Eventually, I reached out to her, and she had filed a missing persons report. She was crying because she thought I was murdered. I went on with my life. I did end up stripping. I still do sometimes. Fast forward to 2017. One of the girls was smart because somehow she set him up. Son of a bitch is rotting in prison right now. I found out because the detectives were looking for me. There are articles about him and all. I'm still cool with the girls. I know it wasn't their fault. We still talk. This happened earlier last year, and it still messes me up if I think about it too much. First, a little backstory to explain. I'm a delivery driver for Uber Eats and have been doing it as a side gig for the past year or so to earn some extra money. Also, I'm a girl. Anyway, yeah, Uber Eats. It's a super chill job. Although the pay is definitely not ideal, especially at night. Normally, any pings I get after 10 p.m. are just shitty fast food orders to customers where the chances of being tipped are even lower than what they already are, which is low. I would say 2 in 10 people tip on Uber Eats. Anyways, yeah, late night deliveries, barely profitable, which is why I would barely do them. However, on this night last year, there was a bonus going on. Reach 15 deliveries in a certain time frame to get an extra $75, which was music to my ears. When that's the case, late night deliveries rock because there's no traffic and it doesn't matter where you're picking up from. The faster you can get them done, the faster you get to get home and knock out. Open roads all the way work for me. I was on a roll and finished my last McDonald's run at 2:30 in the morning, cashed my bonus and called it a night. For context, this took place in downtown San Diego. It has fun restaurants and clubs at the core, but as you branch out, it gets more seedy. Once you get past 16th Street, it gets really sketchy. Lots of homeless camps, the works. I actively try to avoid that area, but in order to get back home and on the freeway, I had to pass through that neighborhood. One more piece of info. I drive a shitty 2002 Ford Focus and nothing's automatic. In order to roll the windows up or down, you have to reach over and crank the lever. Because it's a hassle to roll them up and down manually each time, when I do deliveries, usually I just keep both my windows rolled down because it's easier to pick up / deliver through the windows. This night, screw me, I had my windows down as usual. I was planning to roll them up before I passed 16th Street, where the homeless camp was, but I didn't get that far. As I turned down a side street heading towards the main drag, up ahead, I see a man in one of those orange reflective construction vests, standing on the side of the road. There's always some sort of construction going on downtown, and it's pretty common for it to happen at night, so I didn't really pay much attention. As I get closer though, the man runs into the middle of the street, waving his arms signaling to stop. I start to slow down, thinking he's going to direct traffic or reroute me or something. I brake to 10 miles per hour, then 5, leaving distance, trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do. He breaks out into a jog towards my car and stops directly in front of it, blocking me and my car from moving forward. I had immediate unease. This is weird. I wish my windows were rolled up. It's 3 a.m. on a dark street and there's not a soul around me except for this dude. People talk about fight or flight, and I've always wondered how I would react in a situation that warranted a similar response. Now I know my reaction is to freeze, because as I was slowing down, it hit me 5 seconds later than it should have. This guy is not a construction worker. He has on a hard hat and a vest, and the creepiest smile I've ever seen in my life. At first I thought he was just smiling to be friendly, but smiling to acknowledge someone longer than a few seconds is super unnerving. Try it right now. Count to 5 in your head while grinning and you'll see what I mean. That's what this guy was doing. Now that he's in front of me, I can tell he's homeless. That or just, I don't know. Older guy, I would guess 60s, but homelessness has a way of making everyone look old, so who really knows? But he's just staring at me. Wild-eyed and smiling, all teeth. Honestly, his smile and mannerisms, the best way I can describe it is Twisty from the American Horror Story. Google him if you want to. No pressure if you don't. Literally though, this guy looked insane. I obviously should have reversed, but my brain was panicking and I didn't think that fast. I'm frozen in my car, thinking this is how I die. This whole time, he's not saying anything, just leering. Then, like a ninja, he jumps onto the hood of my car and slams his fist against my hood. I am literally frozen in terror just watching this guy. He starts pounding on the hood of my car, crawling around on his hands and knees, not saying anything, just crawling and staring at me. That was the most terrifying part. He never broke eye contact once during all of this, and he never stopped smiling. The thought of my windows being open made me want to throw up, but at the same time, breaking eye contact and moving to roll them up felt scarier. Like, if I made any sudden moves or looked away, he would try to come inside the car. He never said a word. I think it would have been less scary if he had said something, but he didn't. Just pounded his fist on the car and stared. In all reality, this whole encounter probably lasted all of 15 seconds, but it felt like days. I'm freaking out inside, and before I can gain the sense to do anything remotely intelligent, I see headlights in my rearview mirror coming up behind me from down the street. The man sees them too, and in an instant, he jumps off my car and breaks off into a run behind me, heading toward the new car. I floor it and don't look back until I'm halfway home on the freeway, and at this point, it's all adrenaline. For a long time after that, I stopped delivering at night. I sure as hell don't go to that section of downtown anymore. I take the longer route home, and I don't drive with the windows down at night if it's in an area even remotely run down. What I realize from this is how naive I can be to just automatically trust or obey someone just because they have a uniform. Like, I didn't even question slowing down at first, even though the situation was sketchy. The opposite, actually. In my mind, I was comforted by the fact that somebody trustworthy was on the road. Subconscious thoughts went like, oh nice, a public servant doesn't want me making a wrong turn. By the time I stopped, it would have already been too late if this guy wanted to attack me. I shuddered thinking about it. I calmed down eventually by reassuring myself that this was probably just a crazy dude on drugs who meant no harm. Which hopefully is the case. And for my own peace of mind, I'm going to believe that it is. But what got to me is the fact that this guy was dressed as a road worker, on the road and deliberately at first, behaving in a way to lead me to believe he was one. Why else wear that outfit, and why are you trying to pull cars over, just to freak people out? I don't know the answer, and I'm glad I didn't find out what it was that he wanted from me. Yikes. I was about 8 years old, and my mother, my little sister, and I were taking a road trip across Wyoming. This wasn't unusual, as we had family living all across the state, and my mom loved piling us in the car and driving. My memory of this event is patchy, and I remember it more for the way my mom reacted than for the event itself. I don't exactly remember where this was or where we were headed, but anyone who has ever driven through Wyoming knows that the roads are mostly deserted. We had been driving several hours behind an older green and white truck. We were approaching a gas station, and I remember my little sister being so excited because she wanted to get those little bottles made of wax that had juice in them. The green and white truck pulls into the gas station and we follow. We use the restroom, get some snacks. My mom fills up with gas, and we get back into the car and back on the road. A little time passes, and my mom asks, "Is that truck behind us the same one that we followed into the gas station?" I turn to my seat and confirm that it is the same truck. I sit back down and continue eating my snacks, but I sense that my mom is uneasy. She keeps looking in the rearview mirror and watching the truck. It was a long drive to the next gas station, and along the way, the truck behind us would speed up and get dangerously close to us, and then back away a little. After a stretch of several miles, we were nearing another gas station. My mom adjusts her mirror so she can see us in the back seat. She says, "I'm going to pull into this gas station and open my door like I'm getting out. I don't want you two to open your doors. Don't get out, just sit tight and hang on." My little sister and I look at each other like, okay. I thought it was strange, but the look in her eye scared me a little. My mom is a calm person, but she has this presence about her that makes you aware that she isn't to be messed with. All my friends throughout the years have been a little scared of her, which is odd, considering she is just over 5 feet tall and about 100 pounds. Anyway, we pull into the station and up to a pump. My mom adjusts her mirror to see behind us and opens her door with the car still running. The green and white truck pulls in and parks just to the side of the turn-in. Driver pops his hood, gets out, comes around to the front of his truck and props his hood up. He starts messing around under the hood with his back to us. From what I remember of him, he was a really big guy, but who isn't to an 8-year-old? My mom slams her door and peels out of the gas station. I turn in my seat to watch the man. He turns around like he was startled, looks right at us, and quickly closes his hood, even though he had only been looking in there for a few seconds. At this point, my mom is driving so fast that I lose sight of him. I was terrified, and I knew it must be serious for my mom to drive like this. Up ahead, the road bent sharply to the left, and there was a small road to the right with a few buildings. Just before the bend, my mom slams on the brakes, pulls the steering wheel all the way to the right, and, as if it were straight out of an action movie, slides around the corner. She speeds through the small parking lot of one of the buildings and parks behind it. From our vantage point, we were hidden from traffic behind us, but could see anyone passing. A short time later, we watched the green and white truck speed right past us and around the bend in the road. Obviously, my sister and I were very shaken up. My mom asked if we needed to use the restroom, and I said yes. She said that she did too, but we would wait here for a bit, then make our way to the next station. I'll never forget what she said next because it was so out of character for her. She said, "I'd rather piss my pants in this car than be murdered on the side of the road." A little time passed and we got back on the road and we continued on our trip. We never saw that truck again.